Morning, guys. He brought me up a stool. I wasn't sure what kind of stool that was going to be when he first brought it up, but I see it's one to sit on if all else fails. And also, I mean, I've been introduced a few times, but never told how good everybody else is going to be, and then say, "Now you got Roger." you know, that sounds like my mother-in-law. But the other thing to tell you, he started this. So, but to tell you how I first met Dave Cavan, we were my wife and I had bought a house up in the Glenmore edition of Troon Country Club, and there was this house being built kind of down a couple and over on the other side of the street. Every time I'd come out there, for 3 times, I got a big nail in my car and the tire and had to get the tire changed, this, that, and the other. And finally, the last time this happened, I wasn't happy. Let's just put it that way. So, I don't know. Is this being taped? I don't know quite what I can say. But at any rate, there was this Cavan Builders sign. So I got on the phone and I called up and I said, "I want to talk to this Dave Cavan, whose name's on this thing." "Why is that, sir?" I said, "Well, I just want to talk to him." "Well, he's not in, but his son is." I said, "Okay, let me have him." So they put on poor Dale, and I said, "Now, are you got anything to do with this building across the street?" He says, "Yes, sir, I do." I said, "Well, let me tell you something." I said, "I expect a check for my tires. I expect stuff because you've left nails on the street, and I want some restitution for this." He says, "Well, sir, you don't understand. We clean up our job sites. We get these awards. I said to him, "Son, now let me tell you something. You know that nice big plate glass window you got in the back of that house?" He said, "Yes." I said, "What you're telling me is because I can't identify your name on that tire, on that nail, that you're not responsible, right?" "Right." I said, "Well, let me tell you something. Tomorrow morning when you all come to work and you find this huge rock in the middle of the living room right through that window, you're going to know who did it, but I want to see you prove it." And hung up the phone. So the next thing you know, he calls up and said, "I'll be right out with a check." So he came with a check, and when he was there, I wasn't very gracious to him, and this, that, and the other. And got the check, turned around, and here's my wife. She says, "Now, were you a wonderful Christian witness?" She says, "You really showed yourself to be a true guy with that young man." Yeah, they can do that. She made me feel about that high, of course. So I went to the phone, called up, wanted to talk to this Dave Cavan. He still wasn't available, of course. But I got a hold of Dale, and I said, "Dale, I'm going to send you the check back. I was not a very good witness with you. I'm sorry, this, that, and the other." But I sent the check back to Dave and put on there, "Look, I wasn't very kind to your son. Looking forward to meeting you. Welcoming you to the neighborhood in a little different way. And you owe me dinner." So, at any rate, that's how I first met Brother Dave. And just like
I don't remember getting the check.
you didn't. I endorsed it back to the company. That's why you didn't get it. But guys, this morning I'm going to attempt to let you know a couple, 3 things. One of them I'm going to I'm going to tell you kind of the ending to start out with and go from there. But the main thing is that the will of God will never take you where the grace of God will not protect you. And I think I'm living proof of that. But also I thought this morning, how am I going to explain to these guys a trucker? So I thought about time I had some terrible gas, and I went to the doctor. And he says to me, "What's the problem?" I said, "I've got terrible gas. It's just unbelievable, and I don't know what to do about it." He says, "Well, go over there at the corner." And he says to me, "Take your clothes off," and he says, "Behind the curtain, and come out and we'll do this." Well, I went over there, took clothes off, came out, and this guy had found a pole that looked like it must have been 8 feet long. Now, you've all had colonoscopies. You're all old enough to have had those. And this had a ring on the end of it. And I'm looking at that. I'm looking at him. I'm looking back at that. I'm looking at him. And I said, "Can I ask you a question?" He said, "Sure." I said, "What's the pull for?" He said, "To open up the window to let the gas out." So maybe this morning we're going to get a little gas out, but at the same time we're all going to learn something here together. And you know, fellas, that there's no way to start my deal except to tell you what Dave's a good friend and has become a pseudo friend of mine through Dave Henry Blackaby said to me when I was in one of my depths of trouble times. He said, "Look at what God is doing in your life now. For He's training you for what to be ready for what's coming off next year." And he said, look what God was doing in your life last year, Roger, because He was training you for what's coming now. And you know, fellas, I find that that's a lot of truth. If we will just do that, if we'll look to see what God's doing and what God's not doing. The other thing through that and other things, then I'm going to get on with this, is that my life verses have actually become Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all ways acknowledge Him and He will make your path straight. And I'll tell you, when I do that, I'm in pretty good shape. But I don't do that all the time. Now maybe you guys can all live your life verses and have everything hunky-dory all the time and stuff, but not me. Not from the time I think I was born to probably this afternoon. But I'll tell you, I grew up in a little town called Farmer City, Illinois. 1,800 people then and 1,800 people now. Our high school class had 46 people in it. 38 of us are still alive, which is somewhat of a miracle in itself, but there's nothing like growing up in a little town. I didn't know we were poor till I went to college, but everybody was poor. But at the same time, we all had enough. There was food on the table, there was a pair of blue jeans, and then there was a better pair of pants that you wore on Sunday, and a better shirt that you put on Sunday morning, that after you got through a Sunday school and church, you took that off immediately because put it back in the closet so it'd be okay for next week. And I consider myself so lucky to have grown up in that kind of environment. But also the kind of environment I grew up in. My mother was a saint, none better. And she's up there waiting for me. And I'm going to fast forward a little bit. My dad, who was the most miserable, mean drunk you ever met in your life, whore chaser and the whole 9 yards, supposedly accepted Christ on his deathbed at the hospital during an operation with the doctor. And I thought, you know, it's just like that son of a gun. He's going to coast in right at the end. And here I've tried to pray for him. My mother wore her knees out for him, and people loved that guy like no other. But he was certainly a character. And you know, growing up in that kind of home, I had all the Sunday school pins. I could play the game with you. I could tell you, I could recite verses. I could tell you all the stories. My mother took me to Sunday school and church every week of the world, and you didn't. But one of the times that you always hated the most, my sister and I, was Christmas. It's still hard for me today for Christmas, because my dad and his brother and we'd all have to go over to my grandmother's house on Christmas Eve. Those two guys would get drunk, go downtown, get in a fight, come back to that house. If they couldn't find anybody else, they'd fight each other. And then you had to go home with that. Where with my dad, when he went home, and you never knew when he was going to knock you right off your feet. And if you cried, he'd hit you again until you didn't cry. So I went through a lot of young years not being able to cry. I can drop a hat now. Since God has eared my heart, He's gave me that I can sob. Probably will this morning. You got to forgive me. But at any rate, the one thing He did, He put a work ethic in me second to none. And He did work hard. He was one of those old guys. He worked hard, and stuff. But at the same time, I'm going to fast forward through some of this because when I got ready to go to college, he said to me one day, he says, "You going to go to college?" I said, "Well, I think so." He said, "Good luck." And I knew exactly what good luck meant. If you can go, if you can make it, you can do it. Now at the same time, my mother all the way through college, every other week I'd get a check for $50. Wasn't a check, it was usually a cash in an envelope. And every time she put the same thing in, "Don't ever let your dad know." Because if he'd have found out, he took the money away from her. He was giving her too much. If she had enough money to do that it would, that he was giving her too much and he could use that money in taverns, he could do whatever else with it, but he did provide. He believed in providing. And it's one of those things that my sister and I, we begged my mother to divorce him many times. There was no way. When she took the marriage oath, she took it. And I'll never forget one time long after when my mother died, and his girlfriend for 30 years, why he was with her. And I said to him, "Why don't you marry Ruth, for heaven's sakes?" He said, "Why would I do that?" He said, "They had the best woman in the world. I got no intentions of ever getting married again." I thought, that just blow your mind. He admired my mother. He adored my mother. But at the same time, that was just him. And, I'm probably going to see him in heaven because that doctor's right. He's saved. Same time, I got to look at it. If God took him, if he took me, he'd take anybody. Because when I got out of college, I came back. My dad and uncle had started a little truck line. They were in trouble with it. They asked me if I was the only one with a college education in the whole family, would I come back and help them out? And I said, "Yeah, but there's two things going to happen here. Number one, what I say is going to go. Secondly, you two are going to quit stealing from each other." My uncle said, I said, "Look, don't start it. I've grown up with you two." And they always ran the business, and if it was good for the family, it was good for the business. I just flipped that. If it became good for the business, it became good for the family. So at any rate, got married to the girl down the street. She was a cheerleader, I was an athlete. And if you were an athlete in this little town, there were two people, two classes of students. You were either an athlete or you were a non-athlete as a boy. And as a girl, you were either a cheerleader and all the clubs and this, that, and the other, or you weren't. And that's just the way it was. The athletes could do anything. Now, you got to understand something. The water boy was considered an athlete. But anybody collected a law. And you could get away with anything as an athlete. The police would never bother you because you were the entertainment for the town, for the community. When you played ball, when you this, that, and the other, and they weren't about to get the wrath that would come from the town if all of a sudden you were ineligible because they picked you up for something. That's just the environment you grew up in. But anyway, I came back into the business, and fellas, I got on the booze and banquet circuit. Got successful immediately, married the girl down the street, and fellas, we got married for all the wrong reasons. We got married out of common peril. Her dad was a mean, miserable drunk. My dad was a mean, miserable drunk. We went all through high school and college crying on each other's shoulders about that and thought it was love. But the one thing we did have was we had two wonderful little girls. I mean, I can't tell you about those two little girls, but I'm going to tell you here in a minute. But here again, I don't know how to put it exactly. I was never as bad as I was accused of being, and I think I missed out on a lot. But outside of that, I don't think I'd have missed out on anything in those years. Nothing was too fast. Nothing was too, you name it. I drank too much, ate too much, fooled around on my wife. I mean, the whole 9 yards. But here again in business, we've become very successful. Just falling in place, if you will. But I woke up one day and I thought, I got these two little girls. They're not in church. My wife, through a university professor, she went back to get her master's, became an atheist. And she started criticizing the person I loved the most, my mother. Running her down and just openly being very hostile towards her. It's easy for me to say that I wasn't a Christian then because I wasn't. But that does not give me the reason to have got divorced, because my mother lived it out. But the truth of it is that through that and other things, I looked at myself in the mirror one night and said, you know, I'm becoming the guy I hate the worst. It's a terrible thing to say you hated your dad, but I hated my dad. Even though I was working with him and stuff, and basically at that stage, kind of his boss, if you will. And but I went to the attorney, to the lawyer, and I said, look, I said, I want divorced, and I want my two kids, two little girls, 4 and 2. And I don't care about anything else in the world. That's what I want. He says, oh, come on. He says, you want your golf clubs, your car, a little alimony as possible, and that's it. I said, no. I got up, started leaving. He says, where are you going? I said, I'm going to find somebody that understands what the hell I want to do, and we'll do it. He said, Roger, he says, if you're serious, he says, we'll do it. We'll try it. But he said, I want you to understand the odds against you. He said, they're 90 plus to nothing. In downstate Illinois, you're going to get custody of 2 little girls. But if you're serious, we'll give it a go. Well, we did. And for 2 years, why, we did that. But in that process, that 2 years, there was this woman in town who was in this little town. She was a banker. Had teller at the bank. She had 2 little girls. Husband cheated on her, ran around. And I'll never forget the first time I met Ramona. She'd kill me, but this, I've heard Jamie get a little risky here. So I'm going to get a little risky and tell you how I met her. First time I met her, I walked into the bank and saw this woman in a miniskirt kind of bent over in a file drawer. And I thought, wow. She raised up, turned around, and I thought, wow, this woman's for me. Now, if you'd ask her that 10 years, you know, go back 10 years in that time, if she would have ever been married to Roger Roberson, or if I'd have ever been married to her, she'd have told you there was not one chance in 500 million that was going to happen. Because one of the reasons is that the druggist in town and I would go take our deposits about the same time to the bank, and then go drink coffee. It got to be who could gross her out the most. The other one had to buy coffee for her. Now, I'm not very proud of that. And she'll tell you, if she was up here, she'd tell you some of the things we did to her. And neither one of us would ever be very proud of it. But at any rate, when you're a man with 2 small children getting divorced, and you're a woman that is divorced with 2 small children, both girls, all girls, you find yourself in a little town, you find yourself the parks, the playgrounds, Dewey's Drive-In, which was the ice cream place, and the stock car races. Now, in those days, I was a track announcer at a couple of tracks as a track announcer for stock car races. Made a little extra money on the side. I made more money than those drivers because mine was cash, and I didn't have to fix a tire at the end of just my mouth. But you know, but here again, I use the word. You know, you got. They tell you the speaker never does that. But to here again, give you a little bit of an idea. Between her and my mother, they wore their knees out over me. And in that 2 years that it took, fought battle after battle in court, trying to run a business, trying to have some kind of a life. Now, when you're dating with 6 people, that gets to be a little bit of a struggle. Now, she was already divorced. I was getting divorced. And I told her if we ever have a chance for anything, we're not going to hide from anybody. I don't hide. And so therefore, we're going to date, even though I'm not divorced. And that I told her, I said, now, as far as I'm concerned, the only thing that I'm not divorced in is the statutes of Illinois making a rubber stamp, because I'm not going back. And I wouldn't think she'd want me back. But she fought for 2 years. She fought for money. I fought for those kids. And finally, on a Friday afternoon, was in court all day. And part of that court hearing was that their attorneys were bound determined to put those 2 little girls on the witness stand. And I almost went to jail because threw a fit right there in the courtroom. Said, "There's no way in hell those you're going to put those two little girls on a witness stand in front of these people, in front of everything else." And I mean, they're 4 and 2 years old. Give me a break. By this time, they were about 4 and 6, quite frankly. And the judge finally says, "Okay, I'll tell you what we'll do here. I'm going to take them into my chambers and talk to them. And I hope that satisfies everybody." And I started to protest that. My lawyer restored, grabbed me by the leg and said, "Sit down. This is as good as you're going to get." So I did. Now, the one little girl, the one that was 4 at that time, was asleep out on a bench. So they took her. He just took the other one in. Now, it took me 15 years to find out what that little girl said to him and what he said to her, because, they just weren't going to divulge that. But the long and short of it was, he said to her, he says, "This isn't your fault. Call it nobody's fault. Your parents aren't going to be able to live together." And he says, "Now I've got to decide what I'm going to do with you and your sister, and I wish you'd help me a little bit if you would." She said, "Well, do I have to tell you what my mother and my grandmother say I've got to do, or can I tell you what I want to do?" Looked there and said, "Well," he says, "what do your grandmother and mother say?" Said that they want to tell you that I want to live with my mother, and that they're going to take me away and my sister. My dad will never see us again. That we're going to move out of state. We're going to they're going to move out. We're going to move out of state. This, that, and the other. And she said, "I love my daddy." Excuse me. So at any rate, now I didn't know this for years, so I can still tear up about it. I hope that's all right. But she said to him, "I love my dad." With that, he said, "Sweetheart, you're going to see a lot of your dad." But I had no knowledge of any of this. I go back to the condo that night. I had the kids that night. Not a condo, it was a little bitty apartment. But I guess you'd call it a condo today, but it was certainly no condo. And they had those two little girls that night. And I thought, I am going to lose them. There's just no chance. I mean, everybody's been telling me this, that, and the other. And I thought, guys, darn, for one thing, God, I don't know how to pray. And I'm convinced through my wife and others and my actions, and I've never asked forgiveness for any of it because I'm too damn proud. But if you'd help me know how to pray, I'm going to listen to you. And fellas, there was a Bible on the nightstand. I picked that Bible up. Now, I'm not a hokey person at all, but open it up, the first thing my eyes hit to was Our Father, the Lord's Prayer. I sunk to my knees. And that's when I accepted Jesus Christ into my life. Told him, "Okay, I got it. You got me. It's taken a lot, but you finally got me. I'm here." And didn't say anything to anybody, but did say something to Ramona the next morning. I said, "You can kind of quit praying." She said, "Why?" I said, "Well, I accepted Christ last night in my life." She said, "Oh no, I got to pray harder now." She knows me. Monday morning, I go to work. I call the staff together. We're still very, very small, but we're growing truck line. I called everybody together and I said, something happened over the weekend. I said, "I've accepted Christ into my life, and I'm convicted that we're going to run this business as Christ would run a business from here on out." Now, you should have seen the looks. Now, here's guys I've run around with. Here's guys that, and women, they're going, "Oh my God, this is what this is the newest deal." Because, I was one of those management by objective guys, and this, that, and the other, always coming out with something new. And you could just see the look on their face. That how long is this going to last? A day, a week, a year maybe, but we'll outlive it. It's okay. Let's all stick together, and this ain't going to happen. But I'm going to tell you, fellas, from that day forward, that business was run as a Christian business. Now, you didn't have to be a Christian to work there, but the objective was that people would know that we were a Christian company, and that Christ was what was being considered, and we were going to operate in His ways. there's several things that could do, you could do, I could do, a lot of people could do. And in that process, over the years, well, you kind of figure it out. But here again, I went down to Little Rock, Arkansas, the next 2 or 3 weeks after that. And the terminal manager down there said, Roger, he says, understand that something new with you. I said, yeah. He says, well, he says, I guess, by gosh, we can't go have a drink anymore. I said, what do you mean, Emmett? Or Bob? He said, well, he says, now that you're a Christian, why, you wouldn't take a drink. I said, really? Why not? I said, come on, let's go to the tavern. So he and I went to the tavern. I shared my story with him, had a beer with him, didn't have 20, had one, and left. 3 weeks later, he called me up on the phone and said, Roger, I accepted Christ this morning at a little church in Big Flat, Arkansas. He said, I never would have if you had not had that beer with me. So part of what I'm telling you, which a guy gave me some advice a long time ago, right after I become a Christian, he says, Roger, he says, don't abandon your friends. They need to see the new you. He said, everybody becomes a new Christian. One of the first things they want to do is abandon all their friends and start singing Kumbaya at the church and forget everything. He said, don't forget your past. Outlive it. And I think that's true of a lot of us, or certainly true of me. But also, during that time, I had become very active in the Trucking Association. And by the way, 3 weeks later, after accepting Christ, the court ruled on a divorce. I was the first man downstate Illinois to ever get custody of 6 and 4-year-old girls. Doggone judge, he made sure I had to get married. So I'm thinking about that. I had custody of them. Now what am I going to do with them? But that's just being silly. Because I mean, you talk about answered prayer and the whole 9 yards, and to have that happen, like I said, it was just unheard of. Now that case went all the way to the Illinois Supreme Court under appeal and stuff. Got reaffirmed, came down, and so Ramona and I get married. Now, this is what's really weird. He gave her every flippin' nickel, dime, farthing that I had in the world, or that we had accumulated. Plus, I had all the bills. I had to pay her attorneys, and the whole deal. And I thought, and plus, she got alimony. And I thought, wait a minute, Judge, what am I supposed to raise these kids on? Then I figured out, wait a minute, didn't take my mind. He didn't take my belief. He didn't take the company, the stock in the company, but everything else she got. So she got what she asked for. I got what I asked for. And like I say, but the strange thing about all that is there's a couple of funny stories that I'm going to get on with getting on because time's running out. Is that Ramona had to quit her job in the bank to get $15,000 of profit sharing after we got married so we could move out of a house trailer with 4 girls and a dog to a house. And she knew I was broke. How many women do you think take a guy on like that? Not many that have that kind of faith in you. So saved up some money, and the school's out after, and so we could take the kids, and we took the kids to Disney World down in Florida. Thought, this would be a good time to get everybody together and just all spend a little family time together. I pulled into Disney World about in Florida about I don't know if it's Disney World, Disneyland, which Disney World. And we're staying at we had reservations, temporary hotel. Walked in, laid down the reservations for 2 rooms. Guy came back to me and says, "Sir, you don't have a reservation for 2 rooms." I said, "Well, I certainly do." He says, "No, you don't." He says, "You've only got 1 room." I said, "Wait a minute, we're supposed to put 6 people in 1 room, and we're on our honeymoon, Well, that guy looked at me like I was some kind of idiot. Here's 4 little girls and a woman standing there, and he's, you can just see his mind going honeymoon. Oh, yeah, right. I've heard a lot of stories, but this is the best one. Well, which we did a lot in our business and the employees. We played a lot of practical jokes on one another, and somebody had called down and canceled one of those rooms. No. And my wife, when I told her that, and of course they brought in a rollaway and this, that, and the other. My wife said, it's got to be a God thing. I said, well, he's punishing me. But that's just one of the crazy stories. But also, fellas, and trying to run the company as a Christian, I knew if people looked at me, they were going to see a Class A character always. And here again, from broke to, and within 3 years, I was worth 3 times what I was the day of the divorce. And we were going company and starting. But one of the things that we decided we could do was in our trade. We're just starting a new van division, and we had, or before it had been flatbeds. But on the back of those vans, we decided that we were going to put a little church scene that said, please God, attend the church your choice. And one of the first things that happened, a driver had been with me for 15 years at this stage, an old World War II vet, came up and he says, I'm not going to pull one of those trailers. And I said, Chuck, you got to. You're too old. You can't do flatbeds anymore. You can't tarp. You can't chain down. And one of the reasons we started this division was for guys like you. He said, I'm not going to do it. He says, I'm not going to get ridiculed at truck stops and stuff with that kind of nonsense on the back of a trailer. I said, well, I'll tell you what you do. You go and pull it for a week. If you can come back in here a week from now and tell me you still feel the same way, I'll go buy you a new trailer with none of that on it. You've been with me a long time, and you can pull. That'll be your trailer exclusively to pull. It's a deal. 3 days later, he came back in. He says, Roger, he said, I was dead wrong. He said, I've never been treated more kindly on the road. He says, cars are honking at me and waving rather than giving me the finger going by. He says, I pulled into a loading dock the other day, and he says, I was 15 trucks back. He said, they came, pulled me out of line, and loaded me. He said, where I went to unload, he said, they unloaded me immediately. And he said, they told me that truck needed to get back on the road so people could see. And fellas, we got thousands of letters, literally thousands of letters of people saying they were following those trucks. At one time, we had over 500 of those on the road, and about 800 vans that had that on the back of it, but only 500 power units. But at any rate, they just all those letters said that they were feeling bad, or they looked up and there was something that reminded them of God. In all the letters we got 2 bad ones. One of them said that there's only one church, and that was the Church of Jesus Christ, and all others didn't count. I just merely wrote back to that guy and said, you read a different Bible than I do, I'm sorry, but I don't believe what you're saying. The other one from a Jewish guy that said, you should have put church or synagogue. And I just wrote back on there and said, I'm a Christian, and I respect you for your belief, but this is mine. And so that was one way that we could witness. Now the other way is in just your personal life, and that's what I'm going to tell you. And not that I'm a hero or a great guy, but I was very involved in the Trucking Association. Became the national chairman, actually. But we, the company, people, started praying at meetings, started to extend ourselves out in that fashion. And the first time ever that the American Trucking Association meals were prayed over was by me when I became national chairman. Now, the other cool thing about that is that my wife loves Just a Closer Walk with Thee with Pete Fountain. I went as national chairman in New Orleans. And Pete Fountain, his club was at the Hilton Hotel there, which is where the national convention is at. There's about 3,000 people. So I went to the girl at the ATA that did all the scheduling and stuff. And I said to her, I says, Julie, I want Pete Fountain to come up and play for my wife. Just a closer walk with me. She says, you're crazy. He ain't gonna do that. I said, you don't understand. I don't care what it costs. I want you to do it. So she goes, and the next thing you know, he says, this is the craziest thing I ever had happen. I'll do it. And he charged $0. He said, I'll get a lot of free publicity by this. So here again, one of the jobs was going to be inducted that night was that I prayed for the meal, and Ramona was supposed to be up there by me. Well, I get up to pray, and next thing you know, they bring a chair out, set her down, give her a dozen roses, and he comes out and gets on his knees. And Blake's just a closer walk with thee. Now, I'm crying. All the women in the place are crying. Men are crying. Half the men are going, oh, you fool. You realize what you started for the rest of us, you know. And here again, that kind of set the tone, if you will. Because to me, it was a way to honor her in my life for what she meant to me, but also a way to witness to people. And it was effective because, boy, those guys didn't like it one bit. Now, all this blowing and going and everything going crazy and everything, let me fast forward to a quick deal, and then got 4 minutes here to quit, and I've got probably 3 hours left to tell you. And you're all going saying, oh my God, thank it's only 4 minutes. But in 1971, I had turned over my business to a guy, and had enough, burned out, and thought if family and stuff can take it on from where it's at now, there's no limit, because I turned down a $40 million check to sell basically 60% of it, and they were going to take it public. So at that time, the valuation was pretty good valuation. And all of a sudden, I get a call, and there's a forbearance agreement has been signed against our business by the bank, or been signed in the bank for the bank to have. And I had a world-class board of directors. Everybody saying, what, how could this happen? We were showing $6 million profit, and the bank saying we're losing $22 million. They came in and did their own audit. They were right. And when I walked out of that business, it was on cruise control. I never had a losing year. God had blessed it. And here I was out here in Arizona, for one thing, helping with Pinnacle Forum, getting started, watching guys like Kevin and others, and I became their poster child. Because here again, it was a group of men that when they decided to do something, nobody had to ask their wife, nobody had to consult anybody except God. And if the check needed written, they wrote the check. And that guy there is a wonderful example of that. Taught me a lot. I know one time I went to Mexico, remember, Dave, we wound up finishing a school. I told my kids Christmas ain't going to be what you think this year, but we're going to help a lot of poor people have a school. And the funny part about that is the figure was said. A guy said, write down a piece of paper what you'll give or not give, and give it to me. No names, no nothing. And when they opened up the papers, the amount was covered, and he said, everybody send me whatever on Friday. I think it was Friday. Not a person did not send the check, and nobody knew what anybody else had given. But God had funded that through us, if you will, that day. And that's how I became involved with these guys at Pinnacle Forum. Because for one thing, churches didn't know how to handle someone like me. Churches don't know how to handle some of you guys. Because here again, you never felt safe in a Bible study at a church if you're a businessman. Because for one thing, And it happened to me many times. I'd come in on Monday, my secretary come in, she said, Saturday night Bible study, did you say? And I'd go, what are you talking about? What did I say? Well, yeah, something similar to that. And they'd say, okay, you know, Sally Swartz's mother was in that Bible study, and this has come all the way through the office now about you saying that. In other words, you never felt safe. One thing about Pinnacle Forum, guys, is you're safe. Because that's one of the things they found themselves on, is that in the Bible studies, it's a safe area. Right, Brian?
Yep.
And others that are involved in it. Now, I'm totally out of time, and I don't know where to shut this down. But I guess just to say to you, guys, through that deal, I lost $45 million in a day. And still on my feet. And I didn't realize how much of me was tied up in that business. I thought I'd given it to God. I thought I had done everything I needed to do. But you know what? I was wrong. I had kept it, that it was mine. I'm the one, I got the big eyes. Even though I always said we, because it was we that built that business. But at the same time, I never realized how much of me was still tied up in that business, of my life, of my well-being, of my ego, until you lose something. Now, the good news is we were able to, Ramon and I agreed, sat in an office, and the attorney said, well, you got two choices. You can grab, probably get 10, 15 million bucks, and then the business will totally implode. And I said, well, now wait a minute. That means that you're going to have about 1,400 truck drivers stranded out on the road. You're going to have every business that we've ever dealt with get hurt. We're going to have every employee miss paychecks, and yada, yada, yada. He said, yeah. He says, that's probably right. Or the bank has agreed that if you put in $5 million more, that they will let it be sold orderly. And which means that nobody got hurt. I said, what do you think, honey? And this is 12:30 at night. She said, hey, we started with nothing, big boy. We can go out with nothing. She says, the trailer, we had a lot of fun in that trailer. I said, yeah, but I don't think I'm capable anymore. Now, here again, business sold, we're still on our feet. The best news is I had 3 other businesses at that time. I was an entrepreneur. But that guy had pledged those businesses against it. Come to find out he couldn't do that. The banks found out they had a piece of paper wasn't worth anything. And my Jewish lawyer proved it to him. So we didn't lose everything. We went through a period, Dave will tell you, I was at his kitchen with my head down. Thought I'd lost everything that we had worked for and built, and why was God doing this to me? And that's when Henry told me, look what was going on last year, because that's how you're getting prepared. And guys, when I finally gave it up and started living Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, trust in the Lord and not in yourself, because I was always I can do guy, is when my life really started turning around and becoming much better. As a father, as a husband, as a Christian, and just in every way there was. An affirmation of that was about 4 years after all this transpired. My attorney called me and said, I want to have lunch with you. And I said, fine. Went in, and he said, you were the topic of conversation at our firm this morning. I said, really? How's that? He said, well, Roger, he says, he says, we represent thousands of people. This is a pretty good-sized firm in Champaign, Illinois, but they're nationwide. And he said, we talked and we decided that you and Ramona were the only 2 clients that we had, that would have done what you did and throw it all in because of your beliefs and your heart and your character. Said everybody else we represent would have grabbed. Said, called themselves Christian, called them not. I said, he said, no, he says, I'm telling you. He says, to a lawyer, it was said that you were the only two people they knew that would happen. So here again, God used that set of occurrences as a witness. And guys, he'll use you every day if you'll let him as some kind of witness. And just remember, if he took a jerk like me, he'll take anybody. And one thing about it, we're all going one of two places when we leave here. Nobody gets a pass. You're either going to heaven or you're going to hell. And if you got a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, you're going to heaven. If you don't, you better have one. I want you to have it. God wants you to have it. The men in this room want you to have it. And you all know people that aren't. Go out and be a witness to them. Go out and be a challenge to them. Because sometime or another today, I'll guarantee you, I'll get a chance to tell somebody about Christ. And nothing else, I can give them my business card. And on the back of my business card, since the day I became a Christian, is a saying, if you meet me and forget me, you've lost a friend. If you meet Jesus Christ and forget him, you've lost everything. Now that don't cost you 2 cents to put that on the back of a calling card. And when you give your card out, just say, you know, what's on the back is more important than what's on that front. Because you as a human's on the front. God's on the back. Thank you for listening to me.
All right.